Welcome to another episode of The Legal Lens, a podcast where we sit down with legal professionals, law students, and policy leaders to uncover the real journeys behind careers in law. I'm Vivian.
And I'm Tony. We are your hosts, and we started this podcast to help young people like ourselves explore the various paths into professional law and gain advice from those who are already walking them. Today, I'm incredibly excited to kick off another episode with Kirsten Flinn. Kirsten is currently a 2L at Harvard Law and a summer associate at Beveridge and Diamond, a national firm focused on the complex litigation regarding environmental law.
Kirsten, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
So we just gonna jump into our very first question. We're curious, how did you discover your passions into environmental law?
Yeah, I think I've always had a passion for environmental science, and that's kind of where it stemmed from. I went to UGA and I am from Georgia, from a really small town called Tifton, Georgia, and there's not much there besides agriculture. So in high school, I got involved in some agricultural research that had an intersection with environmental science and ecology. And I really loved it. So I thought that's what I was going to do. And I kept being involved in research, and I stayed involved in research with different agricultural fields throughout undergrad, but discovered that I didn't really love it. I didn't see myself thriving in the field, mostly because once you kind of get high enough with agricultural academia, it's a lot of grant writing, not a lot of, you're in the field and handling your own research. And even when you are handling your own research and you're writing it up and you're really proud of it, I wasn't seeing the impacts that I wanted to see personally from my work. You can scream to a brick wall all day about your scientific research and what you think ought to be done, but it doesn't mean that anything's going to be implemented. So I think I wanted to become the implementer. I knew I wanted to stay in environmental science, so I thought that environmental law was a good path to go down. I thought lawyers were advocates, and I wanted to be an advocate. Um, so yeah, I started going down that path, and I love it. And I haven't left the path, so here I am.
So,
Okay, go.
starting off with your undergraduate years, you partook in many opportunities, academics and professional. And out of all those opportunities, which ones do you think helped you stand out the most for law school application?
I think hands down, my time with the Washington semester program. I mean, I'm in DC now. I chose the DC office of my firm. I love DC. Um, but even besides that, I was in the ag school. I was an environmental science girl. So if you're listening and you don't do political science, the Washington semester program is still for you. I did end up doing a legal sector job, but still, always pitching to do the Washington semester program. I think it's fantastic. But during that semester, I was able to work full time with the Department of Justice with their environmental enforcement section, doing environmental enforcement work. And as someone who applied to law school right after um, my undergrad, KJD, kindergarten through JD, is what they call you if you don't take any time off between undergrad and law school. I knew I needed to have experience on my resume before I applied to law school. I think my year at Harvard Law School, somewhere around 80% of students took time off between law school. So I was definitely in the minority of students by not taking time off. So I wanted to make sure I had good experience in undergrad and good full-time experience. It's I think a big difference between doing part-time work and full-time work. So in the Washington semester program, you're able to intern full-time during the day, and then they have night classes. So you can still you're still a full-time student. You can still keep your Zell or your Hope scholarship if that's something that concerns you. But it's able to get really good work, and being able to say that I worked for DOJ opened a lot of doors for other work. I think my EPA position that I did this summer directly after Washington semester program, the person who hired me said, "You worked at DOJ, therefore you're probably a great student." So I don't think I would have got the opportunity had I not done the Washington semester program.
Thank you so much for sharing. We are also looking at the Washington program. I think it's like a really great opportunity offered like at UGA. I know you did a lot of research like during college, like either it is for either agriculture or like environmental law. Could you please talk about like your research experience? Because I know a lot of undergraduates really want to go into research, and I wonder if they really solidify your interest in environmental law.
I think there is kind of a divergence between the environmental law type research and the agricultural one. I'll start with the ag one since we discussed that before. I worked in a couple different labs before I realized I didn't want to do academia, but I still really love the work. And I was working in entomology, which is the study of insects. So I was able to, during my summers, go back to the lab and work. My whole senior year of UGA, I went back and worked. I was working with a PhD student, and he was publishing a few pieces. So really beginning, middle of end of the scientific project process and publication for that, I was able to stay involved in it. And I think it's great to be able to comprehend those difficult scientific topics and also great to see science on the ground. And right now at the firm, we do pesticide work, and I've had so much experience with growers and farmers and their use of pesticides and that perspective. So I really value that. And I think on the other end, I did do work that was adjacent to environmental law research. I was a part of the honors program when I was at UGA, and to graduate with highest honors, I'm not sure you guys are familiar, but they make you jump through a lot of hoops in the honors program at UGA. And one of the hoops that I jumped through was taking quite a few graduate level courses so that I could graduate with the highest honors distinction. So all of the research I did adjacent to environmental law, I think, was through taking graduate courses. And you have to do like thesis or some big paper at the end that requires individual research, which I highly recommend because it got me some great recommenders for law school. When you're doing that independent research, it is a lot of work, but you're getting a lot of face time with these fantastic professors, and then they're familiar with your work and they're able to talk in depth about your work and your work ethic. So it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun, and I do recommend taking graduate courses if you can.
Mhm.
So on the topic of research, and this is for all types of majors, not just pre-law majors, uh, what advice or tips would you give students who are seeking to get into research or who are already in research?
I think if you're already in it, really try to make the most of it. It's really easy to just go in and just do what you're told and like do the bare minimum. School is really hard. Um, and at the end of the day, you're still a lot of people are either getting credit or a paycheck for their research. So it's sometimes it just feels like checking a box. But to really get those fantastic recommendations for law school and to make the most of your experience, I think going above and beyond when you can is gonna serve you more in the future. I think if you're trying to get into research, you just got to ask around. It's hard. You guys are great at it, at cold emailing people and getting things done, and I applaud that. And I recommend more students to do that. If there's a professor, even if you're not in their class, if you're really liking their research, you think they'd be fun to work with, email them. Ask them if they have time to talk about their research. See if you'd be a good fit for what they're working on. I think a lot of the times these jobs aren't posted and it's kind of word of mouth. So you've got to get out there and start talking to them. I was able to stay involved in scientific research because I knew the lab and I was able to go back and forth and we had a great relationship. I do regret not doing more research that wasn't agriculture and connecting with some of my political science professors because they had research assistants um, and I didn't utilize that. Or some of my other professors who weren't like working in a field, that kind of ag research, doing more analytical agricultural research. I could have taken advantage of that and I didn't because I didn't reach out. So I think just really connect with professors that you think would be of interest. And you two have so much time left in undergrad that you can reach out and then they'll have your name in the future if they are hiring maybe next year or something. So just don't be shy about that kind of thing.
All right, thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful advice. So our next question is both me and Tony's are first gen pre-law students in our family. So I know that like even us and some many other like first generation pre-law students find it like really difficult to get involved in a legal field because none of our families member ever did it before. So what do you think, what step would you recommend for them to gain like legal experience prior to law school?
This is something that, because I'm also first gen, I did not realize it's such a big deal. A lot of my classmates, their parents are not only lawyers, but they're big law partners and judges, and they just kind of know everything, like how to behave and conduct yourself and what's the next step? I never know what the next step is. So that is difficult. But I think again, I just harp on try to get experience to get your foot in the door. Um, if you're not first gen, it kind of seems like you already have your foot in the door. So we need to do a little extra to make up for that, I think. Um, I think in undergrad, I worked as a legal administrative assistant for a semester at a boutique firm in downtown Athens. And I got that position through Handshake. I think UGA still uses Handshake. The job posting site, there's a lot of duds on there, but there's a lot of good stuff on there too. So if you scour through there, I also think a lot of my friends were working as legal administrative assistants in undergrad, and it's part-time, not really strenuous work. I highly recommend if you could find that position, but that's also word of mouth. So if your friend is doing something you really like, is your firm hiring? Can I talk to the paralegal? Because usually they don't have a whole hiring committee, but can I talk to who's ever is in charge of hiring? Can you let me know if you leave so I can then apply? Um, but there's quite a few firms that will take undergrads. I would just be really intentional about it and shape your schedule so that you can take these opportunities. I think in undergrad, I made sure to only take, and this is hard, it's hard to do, but I made sure to only take Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday classes, not both, so that I could have 2 or 3 days a week where I could be in office all day. It's much easier to get hired if you can be in office consistently all day and not have to work half days. Not saying it can't be done, and I know my firm did allow half days sometimes, um, but it's just being intentional with it, and I made sure I could do that.
Mhm.
And throughout your undergraduate journey, you were very hardworking and ambitious with all the opportunities that you partook in. So I want to know, what did the academia, leisure time, work-life balance look like for you? Because mental health is a very important factor in college.
I will say my undergrad experience was unique, maybe compared to yours, just because COVID did happen, and that happened during my freshman year, and it kind of lingered until my senior year. So I say that like when it comes to extracurriculars, that really took a hit at UGA, at least for the extracurriculars that I was involved in. And it was really hard to get those back up off the ground after everyone came back on campus. So even though the academics and like the actual working that I did took off and that was full steam, I do think that extracurriculars were difficult for me. So I can't speak fully on that, like being involved in doing all these clubs. And yeah, I didn't do that as much. I chose one or two that I really enjoyed. And I still think the commitment was not as strenuous as it might be today. Um, but I did work all throughout undergrad. I don't think there was more than probably 2 or 3 weeks throughout the whole undergrad experience that I didn't have a job, or two. Um, because I was first generation and I didn't have a lot of family help. So I had to pay for things myself. And I had a lot of odd jobs. I worked in dining services at UGA as a freshman. I worked at Chick-fil-A for a whole year. That was an experience. Before I started, I was able to go back and get some legal experience in my junior and senior year. But I will say that was hard to balance. Working 20 hours a week plus taking 15 credit hours and graduate level courses, and
Mhm.
it was tough. I don't think I did the best job at balancing it. I think I always blocked off Saturdays when the Bulldogs were playing, and those were sacred. No work on Saturdays. Um, Got to support the team, but I think you've just get a planner. I know that's the most basic advice, but I also plan personal time. I block off how much time I think each assignment or something's going to take, so I know how much time I have for myself personally. If I have something coming up, block that out. So you kind of already made a commitment to yourself that you're going to take time off and do that. Um, but it is tough. I still think it's a great idea to work in undergrad, especially if you want to go to law school right after undergrad. But sacrifices do have to be made. Yeah, it's tough.
That's definitely a very reasonable answer as a law student. So now that we transition to law school application, as a lot of our future audience love to hear more about, considering Harvard is one of the very top law school, Which characteristic do you think that that in the application that would attract the Harvard admissions, whether it is grades, LSAT, personal statement, interview, etc.
I'm gonna throw you an oddball. I don't think a lot of people say this, and I think it's the most important one. I think your personal statement or any written piece that you're giving to the admissions
Mhm.
um, people is the most important. Um, there are more seats at Harvard Law School, Yale, Stanford. I mean, there's more people with 180s or perfect GPAs than there are seats at those top three schools.
Mhm.
Um, or the T14, there's too many applicants with perfect or near perfect stats.
Mhm.
So I know a lot of people harp on grades and LSAT, and you've got to be honest with yourself. Grades and LSAT do matter. You have to
Mhm.
be within a certain range. There are outliers on each side. Sometimes you'll have a really low LSAT and get in, or really low GPA and get in. But I think those people are outstanding in their written work or their work experience. So my mentality was my LSAT was what it was. It was good, but it wasn't, like a 175 or above. It wasn't excellent. I think my GPA was pretty good, but I wanted to make sure, sorry, I wanted to make sure that anything that was still in my control, which was my written work, was perfect. Um,
Mhm.
so I think, yeah, I'll just talk more about my personal statement because
Mhm.
um, this is the one piece of advice I really like to give undergrads is to focus on. I think it's something that really gets skipped over, and I got a lot of positive feedback from. I don't know if it was specifically Harvard, but I applied to a lot of schools. And one of the things that consistently came up in my interviews was my personal statement, and they wanted to discuss my personal statement. And I took the approach of I've got a lot of things on my resume. They see my transcript. So I want to tell them something that they would never be able to see or
Mhm.
give them a part of myself, a part of my personality that they couldn't get from paper. Um,
Mhm.
and I think, just to harp on this a little bit, my personal statement, I compared myself to a goldfish. Um, and I was like, no one else is going to compare themselves to a goldfish in their personal statement. I will, therefore, they have to keep reading it. Um,
Mhm.
and I wanted, fish, animals. I'm really into environmental science. I got into environmental science because I loved fish and marine life. So I was able to tie that in and create a personal narrative. All of this was about creating a personal narrative within my personal statement. And goldfish, fun fact, are very invasive. If you get a goldfish from the fair and throw it into a pond or a lake, and they grow really, really big. So I wanted to make the analogy that I am a goldfish and I'm in a really small pond now. But if you put me in the big pond of Harvard Law School, then I will become a big, massive, invasive goldfish, and really just like unlock this new potential or something really grandiose. And it worked. Well, maybe it wasn't my personal statement, but I did get some positive feedback. I think I wanted to do something that was different and I wanted to do something that really kind of showed a part of myself that wasn't
Mhm.
on paper. And with my personal statement, I took a lot of time to write it. I think I had 3 or 4 ideas. A lot of them got into final edit stages. Um, and I went with the goldfish one. That's my shorthand for it. For every single application. I made a 2-page version and a 3-page version because some law schools have different page limits. And I remember I was taking Tuesday, Thursday classes, and I would get at 9 a.m. I would get to those classes at 8 a.m. every day for fall semester and just work on my personal statements. I mean, they're 2 or 3 pages. I'm not writing my personal statement. I'm going through and revising my personal statement, reflecting on my personal statement, seeing if what is extra, what do I need to take out, what's filler. You only get like 700 words maybe. I can't remember how many words, but it's really short. So I
Mhm.
really took that time, 2 hours a week at 8 a.m. And then also if something came up, I would like pick it up and work on it.
Mhm.
But for an entire semester, I was editing that personal statement. And then when I felt comfortable with that, I moved on to my diversity statement. And it was the same. I know the diversity statement is kind of odd now after
Mhm.
the Supreme Court decision. And I don't know what they're doing with that. I think you can still write one, but I wanted to take the approach of it being less of a pity party and more of another opportunity to show you that I'm a great writer. Um, I'm a concise writer, and here's something else that you couldn't get from the paper. And I took that as another opportunity to build my narrative as an environmentalist. And I think I took an environmental justice approach, and um, being a Black woman from the South, an underrepresented community, um, how I am in all of these environmental justice situations and communities, and how I want to work to do that. And I have done environmental justice stuff in law school, so it's been fantastic. But I think really be intentional about your every piece of written work that you give to them, including I think some law schools also want you to write specific essays just for them. Just don't underestimate how important those are. Even I didn't realize how much admissions counselors were going to talk to me about my written work. Um, sorry, that was a really long explanation, but I really want to impress on students to spend time on your personal statements.
No, that's totally fine. That was absolutely perfect. And thank you so much for sharing that information. Wow, the goldfish analogy, I would not have not thought of that myself, but I think you're really harking on the fact that you can't outsell a poor GPA or a poor LSAT score, but there's one thing you can outsell on. It's how you present yourself, and the personal statement is a facilitator of that. So I love how you point out on being creative and bold with your essay, since there are so many applicants and there's so few ways to make you stand out as the perfect applicant or ideal applicant.
I think that you talk a lot about personal statement. And I think that personally, I did not hear that advice from anybody else. And thank you so much for your advice. Um, we were curious about the interview process, right? Like how was the interview process like for Harvard or any other? You said you applied to a lot of law schools. How were they like? And if you have any tips for people applying or even going to a Harvard interview.
Yeah, so I did apply to a lot of law schools. I think 15, and I did a good spread, I think. Quite a few T14s, um, couple T30s, that range, and then was very intentional about schools outside of the T30 and the T50 based on geography or specialty in environmental law, um, or HBCUs. I think I applied to Howard. Um, so quite a few interviews for that. I think Harvard was unique. I'll start there. I think people might be interested in that one.
Yeah.
Um, I think I was on Reddit a lot. Every you're going to be on Reddit a lot if you're applying to law school. Be careful on Reddit. But I think Reddit told me that the rate of Harvard law, like if you get an interview, there's like a 70% chance or something that you're getting in. So for me, that brought me a lot of comfort. To me, I took that as I'm good enough on paper. They want to let me in, and this is a vibe check, to be concise. They want to make sure that they're bringing in good people who are going to be good alumni for the school. So they want to make sure you're personable. They want to make sure that you can actually speak on the things you put on your resume. They want to make sure that you're fitting into the Harvard community. And as someone who's now in the Harvard community, I really appreciate the admissions officers. I think they do a fantastic job because I think that we have a great community. It's a lot of people, you would think it'd be super pretentious and overtly like competitive and stuff, and it's not. It's a competitive place. Law school is a competitive place. But I think they did a good job of weeding out those people through the interview process. And I say this to say that be yourself, be personable. They want to let you in. You wouldn't get an interview invite if they didn't want to let you in. Um, so just it's you crossing the finish line, I think. And you've just got to be genuine. Not to say don't come prepared. You should come prepared. You should come prepared with why law school, why now for law school was a big one for me since I went straight through undergrad. What about this law school? If your law school is great at sending people to the federal circuits for clerking, great. If your law school, if you really want to do big law and your law school is great for that, that's also great. Some law schools are great at putting people into government sector. Like know what you love about that law school and be prepared to talk about it. They want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence. Um, but yeah, I think the same with Harvard is a lot of the same for other schools. They want to make sure you're personable. They want to make sure you're going to be a good fit into the community. Different law schools have different communities. So sometimes you'll be a great fit for one school and you think you'll be a great fit for another school. Maybe it's even lower ranked, but you just for the best. Like it's a different community, maybe. But yeah, just be yourself. I think honestly, let yourself be a part of that weeding out process. Let them do the work for you. I think it's an optimistic way to look at the interview process. Just don't take it too seriously, because if you're such a bundle of nerves and you can't get out and feel like a somebody who they want to work with and like rub elbows with, then it's not as good for you. So just don't take it too seriously, but take it very seriously at the same time. Um, you got to find the balance.
I love those pieces of advice that you just delivered because, for many K through JDs, which is something I think I will be, the Harvard law interview process or many other law schools, that may be the first biggest interview that they've ever had. So they might be incredibly nervous. And the advice that you give, I think, will calm any nerves. Uh, Moving on to the resume aspect of the law school application, and this question is also catered towards K through JDs. What would you recommend in terms of shaping the resume?
I think for my resume, just like my personal statement, I had two versions. Some law schools only allow you to have a one-page version. And I think if you have a one-page version, you're happy with it, send it to all the law schools. Just because they have more pages doesn't mean you need to put more pages on there. Um,
Mhm.
so for that one-page version, I kept it really concise. Um, I was able to shape my personal narrative in my personal statement. And in that personal statement, like it wasn't just a goldfish. It was also me pulling out things in my resume that I wanted to focus on. Um, that all built into this. I say personal narrative a lot. I wanted to emphasize the fact that I want to be an environmental lawyer. So everything I pulled out was like, look, I have experience in the law, I have experience in environmental science, I have some experience with environmental law. And everything I've done has built up to me becoming an environmental lawyer. Um, so it's just like, I don't know, showing that consistency is something that I wanted to do, and it's something that bled into my resume. So for that one pager, I focus on my research. I felt like that was still important, because it shows that you can read and write, even if it's not legal reading and writing. Um, I focus on my legal experience and my environmental experiences, and I shaped, the narrative pieces of your resume based on that. It had to be really condensed, so I was very intentional. When I had the two-page resume, I was pretty conflicted. Do I include all of these odd jobs that I did in undergrad? I mean, I'm a KJD. I'm going up against a lot of these people who have 2, 3, sometimes 5, 6, 10 years of experience in consulting or being an engineer, or people have whole careers before law school. And I think I didn't realize that as much until I got to Harvard Law School. But just know, you're going against people that are really intentional about going to law school and can show that on their resume and can explain why. I was an engineer, but now I want to be an environmental lawyer. Um, and not all of them want to be environmental lawyers. Just like an example. So I was like, do I include all of this filler? Like I worked at Chick-fil-A for a year. That was a defining 9 months of my my life working at Chick-fil-A. But do law admission counselors want to see this? So I almost didn't include any of that stuff, but I eventually did. And I think it's important if you're working through undergrad, show that you're working through undergrad. Show that you're not just taking 12 to 15 hours and going home and your GPA is a 4.0 because that's all you do is go home. Like give them the context of what you're doing through your day. Show them that you can balance working at Chick-fil-A and then also being in a graduate class and also having this position and this extracurricular. I think it's important for that. But it's also important to show that you have grit, that you I don't know, a lot of people are like, wow, that seems like a job that give you a lot of character development. And it did. So just I think it's something to talk about, even if it's not the most glamorous thing. It's just give them the whole picture if you think it's going to be helpful. Now, if you did something that you're like maybe not proud of, I don't know what you wouldn't be proud of. Like maybe you were a bartender downtown. You're like, I don't know. I think you can still include it. I don't think that's a negative. And as long as you're prepared to talk about it, you're fine. But
Mhm.
like still be cautious, I guess, of what you include. But I would say don't be deceptive. Give them the full picture if you can. And I think it's going to work to your advantage as a KJD, um, to show that you can work. It's also important.
That's wonderful. Now that we transition to law school life, because you have a like unique experience both in college and law school. So for very talented students already accepted into Harvard Law or a T20 schools, what opportunities, resources does Harvard community offer specifically to law school students to prepare them for future careers?
I will say I love my law school, so I will give them their flowers for this. I think a lot of people look at Harvard Law, or I think there's a couple other schools that also have big classes like us. We have one of the largest classes. I think my class before the transfers was about 560 students, and I think a normal class would be about 200, 250. So a lot of law students at my school, but with a lot of law students comes a lot more professors, a lot more clinical experiences, a lot more research assistant positions. I think it's great. I was nervous. I thought it was going to be terrible. I mean, we went to UGA or are going to UGA. So you will have a lot of students in your class. It was something I was used to, but I was nervous. People online told me bigger law school, more problems. It was terrible. I loved it. I in my 1L year, I was working within a couple of weeks. I had a research assistant position um, at a think tank on campus. We have an environmental and energy law program, and they hire 1Ls. So that was fantastic, and it was something I could immediately put on my resume for jobs for the summer, because that starts immediately as soon as you get on campus looking for jobs for the summer. We also have something called SBOs, which are student practice organizations. I think that's what it stands for, which allows you to basically be an attorney. Like you have supervision. Um, but I know people who were like in our fall and spring semester of our first year in court defending criminal charges. And you can do stuff that's also not criminal, but like I think we have a housing one too, or like whatever you want to do. I promise you, there's ample opportunities, and you can put that on a resume, but also get great skills in oral advocacy or written advocacy. We also have clinics. I don't know how experienced you are with the clinic. You go in and you're supervised by an attorney, your clinical advisor, and you are an attorney and you get class credit for it. I did the environmental clinic um, last year. So I got 4 credit hours and I would block off certain days and I would be an attorney. I'd do legal research and I'd work on a team. And depending on the clinic and depending on the project, it varies widely. So I feel like it wouldn't be useful to talk too extensively about clinics, but there's a lot of information online about clinics, and each law school will probably have a lot of information about their clinics. Um, Trying to think what else. Again, with more professor comes more opportunities to become a teaching fellow. I think, yeah, we call it TA in undergrad. To be a TA, like you do well in the class and you can become a teaching fellow, and it pays well. So that's also good, and it's good to get face time with professors. But so many opportunities to get involved, so many opportunities to get paid. So you can see, I worked a lot in undergrad. I didn't want the money to stop in law school. I mean, don't work too much in law school. Don't stress yourself out. But yeah, I think it's been great. Harvard, because of how big the school is, has so many opportunities. So keep that in mind when you're looking at law schools and applying to different schools. What can one else do? A lot of law schools and people will tell you not to get too involved as a 1L. I don't think anyone listens to that advice once you're on campus. But yeah, don't stress yourself out, but look for opportunities in case you do want to get involved and do a lot of things. Yeah, I think Harvard's been really great in that aspect.
Wow, that's just incredible, the amount of opportunities that Harvard Law School has. I think that's what differentiates, your top three schools from your, let's say, top 50 or T14, right? Um, Now moving into the nitty-gritty part of your 1L year, uh, at GSU, I was participating in a law laws career panelist event, and the people on the panel, they consistently mentioned how terrifying their 1L year was in terms of exams. One kid mentioned that he cried the first time he took his exam. So I just want to know, when you first encountered your exams for your 1L year, how did you tackle them and what studying tips would you give?
I would tell you not to do anything I did during my 1L year. It's I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's hard. I think what made it easier and helped with the stress. Not all the way. I was a very stressed 1L. So I'm glad you caught me as a 2L going into 3L. But Harvard and a few other schools are pass fail with a grain of salt. Pass fail, but you can pass, you can fail, you can low pass, you can high pass, you can get a Dean Scholar. So it really starts looking like A, B, C, D. But we don't have a GPA. We don't have a class rank. Saves me. I think just the stress of having a GPA and like that added competition between peers can really wear down on you. The only competition between peers at HLS is up here in your head. And it's not really like palpable. People send me their study guides and their outlines. If people take reading notes and I'm like, I'm not feeling great. Can you send me your reading notes for that night before? Multiple people will send me their reading notes. We have study groups. We will go over old exams together and give each other tips and tricks. We help each other a lot, is what I'm trying to say. I think before I got to Harvard, and a big like jab against Harvard is how competitive, and people will hide books from each other and they're like, that was a big one I heard, or people will rip pages out of textbooks, or um, like just really hesitant to help each other. And I found that was not the case. Even people who I'm not super close friends with, um, people who are move in very different circles have been super helpful. And I've been in study groups, I feel like, with so many different people. And it's been great. So the only competition really is up here. It's a group of type A competitive peoples, so the competition does feel fierce. Um, but in my law school, I think about the curve is like 60% of people just pass. So really it's the top 30%, or some people do worse than a pass. So that's stressful. My grades in 1L were fine. They weren't bad. They weren't great. I don't think some classes were better than others. Um, but I think in 1L, I was carrying with me that undergrad spirit of if I just know everything, then I'll be fine. No one can beat me if I know all the information. Surely, I just need to have everything up here. And that's wasn't very successful for me. I think I neglected in law school, a big part of it is knowing your professor and knowing their exams. And at Harvard Law School, they do this thing where they publish all of the past exams that they have for time and all eternity. So you can go back and read all of these past exams for your professors, and a lot of them do the same formatting and ask similar questions. So I spent so much time learning the knowledge and becoming this wealth of knowledge up here that I neglected really strategizing for these exams. What does this professor usually ask? And we have a system where we have, oh, previous students, I love Harvard, they submit their exams. After exams, you can request your exams, like your written work that you did for the exam. And we have a system where students submit and it's anonymous, which is great. But they put the grade that they got with that exam. So if your professor doesn't give you like a sample answer of what they were looking for the exam, you can have up to a decade of student answers that correspond with these exams that are published, and see what was successful for the professors, what was not successful for the professors, and kind of piece together. All this to say, you can do a lot of strategizing for these exams. I'm sure other schools probably have similar systems. Um, and I didn't. I was like, I'm just gonna barrel through and learn everything. And I needed to learn how to write the exam in a method that was effective. So I feel like in 2L, my grades did like a 180. I was like, let's try something different. Let's do what everyone else is doing, and see how that goes. So I would say, to summarize, I guess, not as stressful because we don't have grades really. But also I wasn't being as effective as I could have been as a 1L because I was clinging on to the undergrad mentality. So really just be aware of your surroundings, and law school is a completely different ball game.
Mhm. That makes so much sense. And I was surprised when you said like the environment was super collaborative. I mean, I expected it, but I didn't expect you to say like, all of your peers are wonderful, and there was this is competition in here, but not like competition among the people. But I was wondering if you were ever intimidated by the students' competition for jobs, like the job market is very fierce, or the teaching style of each professor. Do you have any experience, like bad experience, or like you were scared of like a lecture? at all?
I'll start with the students. I feel like for jobs, I'm in a really privileged position that I never felt in competition for jobs because it seemed like there was enough to go around for Harvard
Mhm.
students, which again is a very privileged position. I think it'd probably be the same at Stanford or Yale or like the top of the T14. I can't, I only go to Harvard, so I can only speak on that. But my peers who are very big on the big law, like recruiting training stuff, I don't think there was ever a sentiment of, oh man, if they get that job, then there's one less spot for me. I think you're just competing against yourself for those positions. Not to say that that isn't the same. I'm friends with a lot of students at different schools, and it very much does feel like that's what I've heard. So it kind of feels like that. There's competition for the jobs. I think there's competition for extracurriculars at Harvard Law School. That's where the real competition comes in. For law reviews and um, really law reviews are big because there's the big flagship, the Harvard Law Review, the famous one, like Barack Obama was the president one time. I'm not on the Harvard Law Review. Um, I am on the Harvard Environmental Law Review, and I'm going to be editor in chief my 3L year. And the environmental people are laid back. I think they're great. They're fantastic. If they're listening, they're great. They're fantastic. I think other journals have a little bit more competition. I think there's other clubs too. There's a lot of political affiliated groups. There's affinity groups for like I'm in the Black Law Students Association. Um, so groups based on how you identify. And there can be competition on the leadership for that. But not for the job market. And if it's for grades, you're kind of again competing against yourself,
Mhm.
and not your peers. For professors, completely different situation. I think that it is hit or miss with your professors. Some are really into that old law school style. Like I went to Harvard Law School, and when I did, blah, 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 it was so hard, and we had grades, and I was scared, and I wore a suit to class every day. And they want to like bring that back or like have that feeling. So you kind of ran out of luck. If you had them, their cold calls are hard, their reading's extensive. Um, but you'll get a balance of people who are really nice and realize that law school is difficult. And their class is difficult, and they're not going to try to embarrass you with cold calls. I feel like the ones who try to embarrass you are few and far between. And most of the time, they make an example of you and move on. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be overall, but you do get a few professors who are difficult. But the great thing is, after 1L, you can choose your professors. And we also have a great like rate my professor kind of system at HLS. So I kind of knew what I was getting into. I was able to see how much reading there would be. I can look at their test before the exam even starts and see if this is an exam style that I'm into. Um, so my 2L, I think fall semester, I didn't have one cold call. And spring semester, I'm trying to remember what I took for spring semester. Um, I had like three for the entire, so all of 2L, I had three cold calls. Um, and I wasn't picking based on cold calls. I was picking based on schedule. I'm a big scheduler. I don't like to be on campus every day um, of the week. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, there's a few bad apples, but you can avoid it eventually. It gets better after 1L, um, or so they say.
So going a little bit deeper into the Socratic method of teaching that law professors use, um, for people who are more on the introverted side in the law school class, what advice would you give them to best prepare for cold calls and what to do if you're in a situation where it's not looking good and you're kind of crashing on the answer?
I will say something fun fun for then, fun that we did during HLS orientation was we did personality tests for everybody. And I think they kind of put everyone's like stats on the board, and like 70 or 80% of us were introverts or identified as introverted when you did like the personality test. And if you look at lawyers, most lawyers are introverts. So I think you're in good company. I think a lot of people are feeling the same things as you. So I guess my advice is more generally, most professors, if you're really struggling, you're a 1L, they know they'll let you go. Some professors are evil, for lack of a better term, and they will carry on. But I think honestly, the best thing you can do is just show you're prepared. Show you did the reading. Try to answer to the best of your ability. Because if you can show that you're trying, you're good. I promise. You're usually good. If you can show that you did the reading, you're fine. Now, if you can't do that, and it's obvious that you didn't read and you have no idea what's going on, that's usually when they'll make an example out of you. So the best thing you can do is just come as prepared as you can. Like, do the reading. If you're confused on something, look into it more. If you don't know what a word means, Google it before class. They love that. As one else, we don't know what any of the Latin words mean. Google it before class. You'll look super smart and prepared. Um, but yeah, I don't think the Socratic method is as bad as people chalk it out to be. But some people struggle with it more, and they struggle with public speaking more, and um, it's really like it causes them a lot of anxiety. But I think just be prepared. I don't think it will help with the anxiety, but I think it will help you not be embarrassed in class, which is great.
I think that's great advice to alleviate any anxieties because, for people entering their 1L year, that may be their first time being subjected to the Socratic method. Like I remember when I was at GSU with my constitutional law class, a lot of them were applying to law school, and the teacher wanted to use the Socratic method, and many of them were terrified of answering. So I think that's amazing that you gave those pieces of tips. And in terms of academic life, Harvard is a top three law school, and it's very rigorous. So how did you balance your social life and personal well-being with academia?
I will say, learn from me. Don't do what I did in 1L because I didn't balance. I just did academia, and I thought if I put all of my willpower to learning all that material and never skipping a reading, I usually don't skip readings. It causes me stress not to read. But like the idea, I thought if I just put my everything into it, then I would be set. And it didn't work out that way. Again, like I said before, I feel like I'm pretty honest about my grades. Like they were just okay, in 1L. And so I was like, you know what? I'm willing to try anything to get my grades from just okay to better than just okay in 2L. So I was like, you know what? Let's do the self-care thing. Let's talk to friends. Let's be social. And it helped me not be so miserable in law school. It made law school great. I mean, two of my friends that I met in 1L are now bridesmaids in my wedding. Um, I have really great relationships with professors. I feel like, and I hate networking. It's the bane of my existence. I loathe it. I avoid it at all costs. But to still be able to say, like, I have all these great relationships with professors who are like willing to vouch for me and like know me well, and it didn't feel like networking. Just prioritizing real relationships in law school. And I think it is a balancing act. One thing that my most favorite professor in law school, Professor Medwed, told me, because we've talked extensively about, how to succeed in law school and how to do the work-life balance thing. He was like, just imagine law school is like a stove top with four burners. So you've got your academic burner, your work burner, and your friends burner and your family burner, which I like. Most people mush friends and family together. Don't do that. Give them give them their fair share of your time. He was like, sometimes you're on that big burner that you really like. School's gonna be there, and school's gonna be there a lot. But it can't be the only thing you're cooking. Switch in the friends one. Sometimes the friend one needs the big burner. It needs more heat. Give it that. Sometimes the family one needs more time. And sometimes work is going to be grueling. So the clinic gets difficult, or your SBO needs you to put more hours in. Someone's going to trial. So when I started thinking about it like that, and you can also put in wellness, put in going to the gym, put in eating healthy, all of those things. Like if you can think about it as just, you've got to think about it as a balancing act. You can't let one thing be on that front burner. It'll burn you or something like that. Um, so yeah, it's really easy to try to spend all your time reading, but I think at the end, you're just doing yourself a disservice and you're making yourself miserable when you don't have to be miserable for 3 years. It can be enjoyable. I'm still learning to like law school, but I like it more in 2L than I did in 3L. So that is a plus, I think.
That's wonderful that you like law school now. And I think our experience, we could learn a lot from your mistakes. So, from your 1L mistake. So now that we transition from law school life to your current work, so like the presence right now. I know you're doing environmental law. at a firm. So regarding your specialty in that field, um, would you mind describing what that field looked like?
Yeah. So right now I'm at Beveridge and Diamond, and that is a mid-sized firm. I'm not working in Big Law. This is a specialty boutique firm that only does environmental law. And what we do is we work with companies, businesses, and sometimes we'll work in with municipalities or state governments and stuff, and we help them with compliance, regulatory compliance. We'll do, also not consulting, but like helping them stay in compliance and making sure that they're abiding by different state and federal regulations for environmental law. Also helping them, um, like when you're creating a business and how to like guiding them through all the processes and getting them off the ground. With that, just making sure compliance a lot. But we also do litigation. So about half of the work at the firm is litigation. And I want to be a litigator, so that's great for me. So whenever you do have, an enforcement action or someone is suing you or you're suing someone else, we'll step in for those environmental issues. Um, and I think like if you think of big law firm, they have different practice groups. They'll have like a mergers and acquisitions practice group or like an intellectual property. I'm spitballing. I'm sure those are practice groups at a firm. And a lot of them will have environmental practice groups. So basically you can think of my firm as like one big environmental practice group. And we deal with really, like you don't come to our firm for how do I fill out this permit application? You come to our firm with a really niche, complicated environmental issues. And that gets me out of bed in the morning. I like that about the firm. As someone who knew they wanted to do environmental law, we get really deep into the complicated environmental law issues and can create these novel arguments and be really creative with what we're doing. And our firm was created by people in the like we have a lot of government is I think what I'm trying to say. The founders were in government. One of them was like the first administrator of the EPA, um, or something. And I think like 60 to 70% of people at the firm were in government before they came to the firm. So we also have that really cool perspective of the people who are doing the regulating can now come and really be helpful in advising the clients on how to abide by those regulations and stay in compliance. And that's something that was really important for me. Um, like not only are these people's masters in their field, and some of them were at the forefront of writing these regulations and writing these statutes, and they were there when these statutes were created. Um, but I was someone who was really dead set on being in government, and I went to law school thinking I wanted to be a government attorney. And part of that was because of the vibes, the community and the atmosphere at the federal government was something that I was really attracted to. And I feel like this firm also has good vibes. I was really scared of private practice life, and I didn't think I would really fit into it, and all of the terrible things you hear about big law. I don't think it's that terrible. Um, but I was not really interested in being a part of that atmosphere. And I feel like B&T has, Beverage and Diamond has a really great atmosphere. And maybe this is just me being a big government person. I think part of that is because we have so many great ex-government people bringing great vibes to the firm. Um, but yeah, I do a lot of great environmental work and I think it's really fun. I'm having a good time this summer.
So I really admire that answer and the insight that you gave into environmental law because, when people think of the law, they don't always think of environmental law, first of all. They probably think of criminal law, constitutional law, insurance, litigation. So now regarding your current position at Beveridge and Diamond, uh, you didn't get this position through the traditional OCI on-campus interview. So I want to know, how did you attain this position with the alternate route other than the traditional on-campus interview? And what was your previous interview experiences like for intern for government bodies in your undergrad year?
Yeah, I would not recommend this route to anybody. I actually had a position, an offer with, I was full on government. I worked government my 1L summer, and I was going to work with DOJ this summer.
Mhm.
But when the Trump administration came in, they had a big hiring freeze, and anybody who had an outstanding offer with the government had that offer rescinded. So I was a part of the group of people that had the offer rescinded. And as someone who knew they didn't, wasn't anti-private practice, sorry, I'm still at the firm, so I think they're doing some cleaning. I wasn't anti-private practice, but I was not anti-big law. I just knew that I didn't really want to recruit for big law, and I was so dead set on government that I didn't think I had to recruit for a firm, so I didn't. Um, uh, and Beveridge Diamond is a firm that will recruit in that normal recruiting cycle. So they were well and done by the time February came around and I had my offer rescinded. But again, I think this speaks to some of the networking that I had at Harvard Law School. Um, I was able to cold email the hiring recruiting person at the firm here and send my resume and send the situation like, hey, my offer got rescinded. Um, B&D is a great firm because B&D is a great firm, top environmental firm. So I knew if I wanted to pivot, I wanted to pivot to B&D. And I told some professors what was going on. And they have a lot of connections with people at B&D because my professors also are ex-government. We have a big government focus at HLS with the environmental community. So they're able to really put in a good word for me for some of the people who work here at the firm. And I was able to get an interview. I did do the whole big law interviews have like you'll go through like 5 rounds of like it's hours and hours of interviewing. I did do 2.5 hours, like 5 30-minute interviews with tons of different people at the firm. So I did go through that interview process with Beveridge and Diamond. I just did it in February instead of July, I think is when my peers were doing it. And I didn't apply to any other firm but Beveridge and Diamond because I thought I was going to work for DOJ this summer. But I do see it as a blessing in disguise. I'm having a much better time at the firm than I thought I was going to, which is a big statement for me from someone who thought they were going to do government. I was dead set on government. I'm really enjoying my time. And I think definitely not getting political, like a political statement. I'm just saying I think the federal government is not unstable, but I think one of the big draws about the federal government is the stability. Um, it's hard to fire federal employees. The work is pretty stable, um, at least for environmental, even through administrations. Like things change up, but the people don't change up. So the atmosphere doesn't change as much. And I don't think the same could be said right now. So I think it's just going to be a big transition period. And I don't know if I want to be a part of that transition period, but we'll see. I think yeah, there's a lot of thinking to do, but I'm happy in private practice for now. So that's good.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I think it's such a shame that your offer got rescinded, but now you find yourself at the place that hopefully you enjoy. Um, and now that we talking about Beverage and Diamond, right? Your current job, what kind of tasks do you usually handle as a summer associate?
Yeah, so been working on a lot of environmental issues, clean water, clean air, the toxic waste ones. Sorry, that sounds like really like ignorant to say it, like a brick run circle, like doing a lot of environmental issues, which is great and that's expected. But I think what wasn't expected is that how like intersectional environmental law is. So like Tony was talking about like constitutional law and insurance and um like all of those things. Our firm also like you have to have a pretty foundation. Like we deal with constitutional law issues. We have been involved with a few Supreme Court cases. One of them, big draw for me for the firm. Beveridge Diamond was lead counsel on a Supreme Court case that they came out on top of. I'll say that San Francisco versus EPA was a big clean water issue that just got to the Supreme Court, and Beveridge Diamond was involved with that. But also, I think we've had First Amendment issues that the firm has been involved in. We do a lot with large class actions. Torts are big. I've been involved in a few cases that have had issues with insurance. But also, Beveridge and Diamond will have practices and attorneys doing cases that are tangential to environmental law or being able to use those same skills that environmental attorneys already have. So we also have a white collar practice, which is very interesting. And sometimes that has nothing to do with environmental law, but it's similar skills and our attorneys are equipped to do it. So they do white collar work. There is an environmental crimes because you can get charged criminally for some environmental regulations. So attorneys that are equipped and ready to help with environmental enforcement of um, criminal regulations. Um, and so you can imagine if like those attorneys also have really great skills that they can use in different things that aren't environmental law. Like our criminal attorneys are great at white collar work and investigations and those kind of things. Our class actions sometimes are not strictly environmental class actions, but we have really fantastic attorneys who are well equipped to do class action work and mass tort work. So I think something that surprised me this summer was how much work the firm does that isn't strictly environmental and how great the firm is at the environmental stuff. I mean, having a case at the Supreme Court for a firm that's not big law, I think is incredibly impressive. And I've been able to connect with the attorneys who won that case and hear their 2 cents and seeing where their practice is going after that huge success. So it's been fantastic. All of that to say, long answer, I kind of forgot the question, but I do a lot of work that isn't strictly environmental. I think about half the work I've done this summer is not strictly environmental, which is great for someone who's just trying to hone their legal skills as much as they can in 10 weeks.
I love how you mentioned that the different fields of law overlap with each other. And I think that's really great insight for people applying to summer associate positions, traditional or non-traditional, because you're not always going to get the law firm that you want to practice in. You
Mhm.
might get another law firm that covers a totally different area, but uh, you can still hone your skills in your main niche area, even at another law firm, and still have a great opportunity. Now, going into getting the summer associate position, not every law school student can get a summer associate position. I know that some law school students during their summer months, they work for nonprofit organizations. So if a law school student can't get a summer associate position, what other activities do you think that they should partake in to invest in their future legal career and make their summers productive?
I think there are plenty jobs outside of big law, but also someone who has not recruited for big law and doesn't intend to. Um, maybe it's really easy for me to say. Some people are really dead set on it. So I understand it's
Mhm.
devastating. And it could be a big loss not to get that position. But I will say I worked in the government last summer. I was planning to work for the government this summer. I think one thing that really attracted me about the government is how much responsibility they give to their can't say associates. I'm trying to remember like their new like junior attorneys or whatever. And also their summer associates. Like you are doing real substantive work. It's kind of like they throw you into the lion's den and see if you survive. Like you get a lot more on your plate than I think you
Mhm.
would at a firm. I've been happy with the substantive work I've had at my law firm. I think there's a lot of work to go around. So I've been really excited with being able to work on a lot more issues than I think some big law summer associates work on. I think there's the idea that big law summer associates don't do a lot of work, um,
Mhm.
which is true for some summer big law associates, but I don't think it's true for all of them. Some people are really putting in the hours and getting substantive projects. So everything with a grain of salt. Everyone's experiences are super different. But I have a lot of friends that work with environmental NGOs. They're doing great work and they want to do NGO work when they graduate, so it's fantastic for them. Um, I would say government is always hiring. I don't know if government's always hiring right now, but even at Harvard Law School, I say as a 2L, I think it's pretty easy to get a big law job. But as a 1L, it's extremely competitive. Like a lot of my friends applied and couldn't get one.
Mhm.
Or a lot of people just skip the whole process because it's so competitive and there's so few 1L big law summer associate positions that they like didn't even plan to apply. They just looked at government and NGO or um, a lot of my friends went like international. Don't forget that that's an option. I had a friend work in London last summer. Some friends who worked at the UN. Or you can just work at law firms in different countries. Like take especially your 1L, because for your 2L, it kind of determines what you're going to do at the law school and like you get your return. And so you need to be really serious and intentional about that. But for your 1L, like have fun. Go do something that's interesting. You don't have to be like, oh man, I'm working in mergers and acquisitions as a 1L, therefore that's my whole life. Like, no, just go do something fun, get some great writing skills, get a writing sample out of it. Go to a different country if you have nothing tying you down to where you are. Like, don't sweat the 1L year. Sweat the 2L year a little bit, but know that there's other positions besides big law. And getting a pig law position, you don't have to do it like as a first year associate. You can work somewhere, get really good skills, get really good recommenders, and then apply to big law later. Like jobs are out there. It's not the end of the world, I think. But again, easy for me to say. I'm someone who doesn't want to do big law.
Mm. I think that's really valuable advice for a lot of students watching because personally, I used to think that big law is the only thing that I could go to as somebody who wants to be successful in a law career. But given your answer, I think there are so many other paths. And I like how you say there's international jobs as well. I didn't expect that. So I think we want to step a little like one step back. About connections and network. So because we all first gen, then we don't really have much of connections in within our like family circle. Do you have any advice for students who are first gen who wants to reach out and connect with people in the legal professions or seeking a mentor?
Um, I'm guessing you're like in the context of like undergrads now who are looking. Um,
Mhm.
because I think it's a bit of a different situation in law school. I think once you're there, you're kind of fend for yourself. Like as a first gen in law school, I'll start there because I feel like it's kind of tangential. There's like I think most schools have a first generation like organization where you and a ton of first generation students get together and they usually have a lot of resources. They're well funded and they have networking events. So like it's not like you're completely on your own. You can attend these networking events, talk to other first generation students. A lot of opportunities come that way. So
Mhm.
don't despair. There is help. But I think if you're an undergrad and you don't know what you're doing and you just kind of want to hear from the experts or someone who you might think is an expert, I am not an expert on anything. But I think what you guys are doing is great. Like, go find someone on LinkedIn or from, if a UGA made a posting about them or something and see if they're willing to talk. And I think with the caveat of be prepared, like be intentional. Reach out to someone, but kind of know who they are, what they do, so you can ask those specific questions. Um, if you are looking for mentorship specifically, like be intentional, give them
Mhm.
something to grab onto. Like, could you do a Zoom call? Can I email you a few questions? Like, don't make them do all the planning and all the work because I think that's just going to give you more bites. Like you're going to throw a lot of things out there and some people are not going to bite. But I think you're going to catch more fish if you give them more bait. Like give them more things to cling on to and show that you are intentional and you've thought about it and you really want to connect with them and their advice and not just a lawyer generally. Not all lawyers are created the same. Not all lawyers are equal too. So like just like for what you want to do specifically, be intentional. And I have found that a lot of people are willing to talk about themselves. I still struggle with networking and I have to go out and network and cold emailing people and stuff. And I hear my advice that I hear a lot is you will not encounter a lawyer who does not want to talk about themselves. Um, People will go on and talk like, look at me, go on and talk about themselves all the time. So I feel like you'd be surprised on how many people are willing to talk to you. Just don't even let them have the idea that you're wasting their time, I think is what I'm getting to. So like do your due diligence, do your research, come prepared. But I think a lot of people like cold email them. They're on LinkedIn for a reason. Not just for fun. Like this is a networking platform. Text them on LinkedIn. If UGA, like if there's a mentorship network, I know UGA has a lot of alumni connections. Reach out to them. I think, yeah, you'd be surprised on how many people are willing to talk about themselves, especially if you get someone who is first generation and you explain that you're first generation. I've read personal statements for people and giving them feedback. I've had Zoom calls with them and we've gone over like what schools to apply to. Um, and again, I'm not an expert, but I've been through it. So I'm willing to help in any way that I can. And I think a lot of, especially UGA alums, are willing to help in any way that they can.
I really appreciate how you mentioned to reach out to alumni.
Mhm.
Uh, from my experience alone, I threw out a lot of bites, and um, I didn't get one back until I contacted a UJ law graduate. So I think that's really strong advice for our listeners to use their college as, something to throw out there, and perhaps someone who is a law alumni or even undergrad alumni might answer them. Now, moving on to our last question. What pieces of advice or steps, directions would you recommend to students aspiring to be in environmental law?
Yeah, I think for me, like my path was really clear. I took environmental science classes. I had legal experiences. Like I knew that I kind of wanted to create this narrative for myself to sell myself. And so I think like my sophomore year, I was like, I'm gonna need to like show them that I want to be an environmental lawyer. Don't know where I got that idea from, but I'm glad I clung to it. So I wanted myself on paper to look like an aspiring environmental attorney. And I think that's great advice. Like join an environmental club, take an environmental class, take a legal class, like do something to show your interest. Not saying you have to. I know plenty of friends who were like theater majors and they never thought about environmental law until they step on campus. And now they're going to be fantastic environmental attorneys. Um, so you definitely don't have to. But I think at my firm, yeah, I think like a third of our attorneys have a technical or scientific background. And I
Mm,
think it helps. Environmental law, I mean, I'm not an IP attorney, an intellectual property attorney, but I think it's similar with like having or like tax law. Um, those three fields off the top of my head are fields that like having that background knowledge can be really helpful because you're getting into really technical um topics. I think even with tax and IP, like sometimes I think there is a requirement, at least for IP, that you have to have a certain degree. In tax, you have to go through certain certifications. Environmental law, you don't, but I think it's helpful to have that background knowledge and kind of know how things work. And you can maybe not speak with authority on any issue, but like you can understand it and it's less work to do,
mm,
if that makes sense. But
yeah.
also I think advice that you hear from a lot of students is there's no specific major. If you're first, you got to get into law school before you do environmental law. There's no specific major that you have to do. I was in the ag school at UGA, and my major was environmental economics and resource management. I minored in poli-sci, environmental law. So still being very direct, like I knew what I wanted to do, but like you don't have to be a biochem major if you want to do environmental law or like medical malpractice. Like you don't have to take the hardest path to get there. You
Mhm.
can take the most interesting path to get there. I thought environmental science was the most interesting path for me, and it's something that I wanted to do. But like there's no need to go and risk a low GPA for something that you think is impressive on paper. That being said, I took grad classes. Those were hard. It was a risk to GPA. I learned a lot. I think it was great. I don't think this means be conservative with your schedule, but I think it means to be reasonable with yourself. Don't take Calc 3 if you're like an English major because you think it's going to make you look smart. Lawyers are bad at math. It's not going to make it's not going to help you as much as you think. So I don't know if that's like super helpful. I mean, I in undergrad, a lot of my friends are now scientists, are in like STEM degrees, and they took lots of hard classes, and um, I think that pressured me to take a lot of hard classes, and luckily it didn't hurt my GPA, but it could have. So if you're looking at environmental law and you're thinking, let me take all of these like really difficult classes, you don't have to. Um, but it could be helpful to take some STEM classes. I think, yeah. And again, just I don't think you're going to meet someone who's not going to tell you to get more experience. Like, even if it's not environmental experience or it's not legal experience, do something. It's best if you can wrap your experiences into this personal narrative. And mine was wanting to be an environmental attorney, but just do something to put on your resume, especially if you're not going to take time off and you're going to go straight into law school. Not only to like show that you can work and pad your resume, but also to show that you've tried other things and you still want to do law school. Because that question undoubtedly will come up. It came up in almost every single interview that was like longer than 10 minutes of like, why law school with no break? What have you done to prove to yourself that you actually want to be a lawyer? Um, so think about that when you're filling your summer with things to do. I think,
Mhm.
yeah, don't not work during your summer if you can help it. Like try to go out and do things. Um, it's for the best, I think.
I think that's really wonderful advice. And I like how you have your path very clear, like environmental economics. That's an undergrad major. I think a lot of people struggle to find their path in college and they try like many different things, just like a lot of friends that I know. And I think that's also wonderful that you try out, that it's not only about your major, but try other things. I think that's a really good advice. Um, I think that's all of our questions for today. And personally, I learned a lot from this interview as a pre-law student. I learned a lot, and I think Tony as well. And I hope that people, whether they in like high school, college, or law school, applying to Harvard Law, applying to summer associate job, could take away a lot from this interview as well. So thank you so much, Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for reaching out and inviting me. And I think if anyone's still listening from all this rambling, like take these two as a prime example of what you ought to be doing. Like reaching out. If you want to know something, reach out. And do Sorry, this is not a question they asked me, but I think that you guys went about it in a really great way. And I wish you so much luck and I hope you have so much success when it's your turn to apply to law school. So yeah, so good luck and enjoy undergrad while you can.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy your time at DC, and I really hope that we could connect further in the future if there's any chance. And I'll definitely update you on publishing the podcast so that you know. But yeah, thank you so much, Kirsten, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was an honor.
All right. Well, have a good night, guys.
Thank you so much, you too.